PRO-PURE is the best gravity-fed filter out there. It's what my family uses. INFOWARS.com already has the lowest price on PRO-PURE. But if you add the promo code WATER at checkout, you get an additional 10% off at INFOWARS.com. You can also call to order 888-253-3139.
Welcome back to InfoWars Nightly News. I'm your host, Rob Dew. And like we covered earlier in the show, we have a lot of natural disasters going on. We've got fires out in Colorado. We've got major storms, they're calling them land hurricanes, going out in the eastern area, hitting D.C., Maryland. And then we have Fukushima that's looming out there over in the Pacific that's just slowly sending radiation our way. Well, what do we do? Well, today I called Matt Stein and said, Matt, what's going on? What can people do? What kind of tips can we give people out there? Things they could do now to help themselves when these things happen. And so he's agreed to come on. Matthew Stein has a BS from MIT and is a best-selling author of When Disaster Strikes, which we carry at Infowars.com, a comprehensive guide for emergency planning and crisis survival. We also carry When Technology Fails, his other book, which is a little bit bigger than When Disaster Strikes. I'm sure it's chock full with all kinds of stuff. When writing, and there's When Technology Fails, and that is a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and surviving the long emergency, stuff we've been talking about here for a long time. When writing When Disaster Strikes, Stein spent months researching EMP, solar storms, nuclear issues, and including many hours of interviews with top scientists and experts who have urged Stein to take these startling conclusions to the public's attention. It can happen at any time, and as the people of D.C. know, it's happening to them right now. So we turn now to Matthew Stein. Sir, how's it going today?
Oh, it's actually going quite nice in my part of the country right now.
Excellent.
So,
what part of the country are you in? Your Pacific time.
I live near Lake Tahoe on the border of California and Nevada in the High Sierra Mountains. So
it's beautiful. Summers
in Tahoe are about as good as it gets unless the fires start blowing through, and then it gets really nasty. And so far, we're avoiding them this year. Knock on wood.
Well, let's go right into fires, because we've had most of Colorado is on fire at this point. They put out about half of these that are going on. And earlier we were talking about things that people can do just to, help not fireproof their home, but prevent some of the damage. As you mentioned, sometimes there'll be a house that's totally burnt to the ground, and right next to them, that house wasn't burnt. So what were those people doing that you could share with the rest of us?
Okay. Well, the very first thing that most people are aware of is what's called defensible space. And that's making sure that you get anything with fuel that might bring a fire into your house as far away from your house as possible. So get rid of the tall grass, brush, limb the trees up like 20, 30 feet up the trees if you're in a fire zone. Then the things you can do is kind of notch it up. Like there was a big fire in Laguna Beach in 1993 in Southern California, and the firestorm was really severe there, much like what you're seeing in Colorado. And in that situation, the average home, whether you've got defensible space or not, is gonna incinerate. But there were a few homes that were so fire resistant that the firestorm went right over the top of them and around them and didn't burn them up. And so you can kind of sort of start at the bottom and work up on your own home, and to make them super fire resistant to survive a major firestorm, that's tough, but you can take it up in grades and improve your chances of surviving. So one of the first things you can do, like say there's a fire that's actually coming, or you're really worried that it's severe fire danger. So one of the things you can do is take like double thick sheets of sheetrock, cut them up and make blocks for the air vents underneath your basement and in your attic. And what that does is that when you get a firestorm blowing through, you have hot air will get sucked in with a chimney effect, and it'll suck embers and super hot air into your home through these vents and start your home on fire. So if you block the vents, it keeps the air inside your home cool and prevents the super hot air from coming in from the firestorm. Now, that's one level. Next level is, say you've got a firestorm coming and you've got drapes in your home. Well, it turns out that heat will radiate through from the firestorm, right through the glass, especially if it's single pane and not double pane glass. So more resistant houses have double pane glass and are well insulated. and that slows the heat from coming in. So if you've got a bunch of drapes hanging by your windows and you know that you've got to evacuate and you want maybe to come back to a home instead of a burned out cinder shell, then rip those drapes down, or pull them down, get them away from the windows. Anything that might get ignited from heat radiating through the windows. Then obviously if you can hose things down and get them wet, that's good. And especially up on your roof, if you've got an old shake roof, if you think ahead of time, there's stuff called Fire Stop, various different versions that you can spray on the wood roof, spray on your wood decks, and it won't stop a super hot firestorm. That'll burn any kind of wood, but it will prevent a fire from igniting from falling embers and blowing onto your deck or getting onto a wood shake roof. If they're coated with the right stuff, it will prevent those things from starting it. So there's various levels, and in my book, in the fire chapter, I've got a full list of all of the things. Now, all the way at the top end of the scale, the few buildings that survived the super hot firestorm in Laguna Beach were all stucco or earth-based, adobe kind of based buildings. And they put stucco or cement board, like hardy board, that looks like wood, but it's concrete wood, but looks like wood, underneath the eaves. And they put a layer of stucco or cement board underneath the decks, and you can put a fiberglass called, polymer coat that I give the specific name for in the book, don't remember off the top of my head, that's very fire resistant on top of the decks. Or nowadays, if you're building a new deck, you build it out of Class A fire resistant materials that won't burn, that are really, really good. They're a polymer with fly ash in them by a deck company. I've forgotten the name of that too off the top of my head. So those are some different things you can do. But what you really need to be worried about, like if a firestorm is coming, you got to use judgment, because it's much better to be cautious and leave than not. And if you got a minute, I'll give you the story of my friends in Australia in the Black Saturday fire. I mean, that was, they looked out their house on a Saturday morning in 2008, I believe, 2009, and it was 117 degrees outside. Now that's blistering hot, and there was an extreme fire danger, but there was no warnings, and they just looked outside and they saw a big column of smoke. So they threw their computers, some critical files, a couple of bicycles, and a few clothes into their car, and they left. Now this home was an adobe home with a metal roof that many people would consider to be very fire resistant. And they might say, well, I'm going to stay and fight it out because I've got this really fire resistant home. Well, these people got in their car because they knew they had a forest around them, and that if there was a severe firestorm coming through, that their home may not survive, even though it was adobe with a metal roof. So they went to some friend's home that had a more defendable space, that was no forest around them, just tall grass, and they had a pond, and they had fire pumps, and they had a bulldozer, and they had all those kinds of things. And they fought the fire at their friend's home, and it was pretty severe. They had a 10-foot, 15-foot tall wall of fire coming up, but with their equipment and just being grass, they were able to hold it at bay. But when they came back to their home, they found that all of the bicycle repair shop tools were molten, and the home was totally gone, and there was only 3 adobe walls left standing, and outside of that, there wasn't a shred left of their home. So this is where you got to use smarts, because 173 people died, entire towns were incinerated around theirs in that tragic day. And there was entire families found incinerated in their cars when they were trapped trying to escape. So you really got to use good sense and good judgment in a situation like this.
Well, and especially when you have valleys and ridges, and if you're on a ridgeline, the fire's below you, that's the worst place to be, because that fire is coming up at you, and it'll come up at you quick.
It really fast. And, fires, we had 60-mile-an-hour winds in the fires in Colorado recently, and we had a firestorm near our house with high winds back about 12, 15 years ago. Started about 1.5 miles downwind, and luckily the wind stayed the dominant direction and blew it away from us. But there was no stopping it. It closed the freeway 2 or 3 times. There was absolutely no way of stopping that firestorm. Anything in front of it, they'd saved a few buildings and some others went, and luckily mostly it went up a mountainside, and they were able to stop at the top of the mountain before it went down and burned out Reno. But it was severe, and it lasted for, I don't know, two weeks before it burned itself out on the ridge and they kept it from blowing over the ridgetop down to Reno. So, yeah, it can go faster than you can drive in these firestorms, and a very serious, very scary situation if you've ever been near one.
Well, you know, you talked about getting out, and, you know, they threw some bikes, they threw their computers in, and you mentioned that in a press release you sent out today of the things you should grab when you're going to get going, when you have to make that time. You called it, let me see, let me grab this here. Evacuate their home, my life in a box. I like how you title it that way. Your life in a box, these are the things you need to have, you know, if nothing else, you're going to grab that in your grab-and-go bag. You know, what should people put inside their life in a box?
Okay, my life in a box has your critical documents to put your life back together in case you really lose everything. So you've got copies, maybe alien cards, birth certificates. You have the stock certificates, you have all of your insurance documents. Think of all of those important things where you'd say, man, I am really in trouble if I lost all of those. And in fact, it's a good idea to make copies of those and send them to someone in like a far off place of the country. And some people put them in safety deposit box copies, and that's a good idea too. But think about where you live. If you're in an area where maybe you and your bank would get burned in the same thing or fall down in the same earthquake or the same hurricane might take you down, it's a really good idea to get them off-site and also to have them ready so you can just pick up that box and go. Now, these aren't things like food, water, shelter. These are items that help you put your life back together or get things going again. Because, realize if you got a local bank, maybe the bank's burned out too or gone in that earthquake or there's been an EMP or something even larger than that. And having hard copies on hand could make the difference between your information totally gone and being able to retrieve it.
Right, and then let's talk. Earlier, I saw you had your backpack with the. It was like your grab-and-go bag, and you also had the blue tote. Let's. Why don't you pick that up and show it to everybody?
Okay.
And also describe the things that need to go in that.
So here's the blue tote, and then here's my go bag. So with the go bag, see, I live in earthquake and wildfire country.
Yeah.
And so if this time of year an earthquake happened out here where I am, what happens? Well, earthquake busts water lines, it busts the gas lines, water heaters and things fall over and fires break out. And then all of a sudden I've got bridges are down and there's a firestorm blowing my way. If it starts upwind from me, it's going to come my way. And nobody's going to be able to fight it because they can't get over the bridges and, it'll be so widespread. So I have to plan on the possibility of evacuating on foot with my bag, or, preferably I go in my four-wheel drive truck and I pick up my trailer and everything's great. And I've got my little home on wheels with a solar panel and all that. I just can't necessarily count on that happening. So some of the items I have, like one of my most important items is water, because you can live, most of us can get by for 3 weeks to a month without food. You may not like it, you certainly wouldn't feel good, and you wouldn't be happy about it, but you could do it. But in hot weather like we're in right now, if you have to be physically active, like physically evacuate, you could be in trouble and could start dying in a single day. And certainly in 3 days, people start to die without water if they have to be physically active in warm weather. So I have, let's face it, if you're on your own, you can only carry so much water in your back. And so you're going to be drinking out of the duck ponds and the local ditches and the local creeks if that's all you got. So this is a backcountry water filter, kind of like a backcountry standard by Mountain Safety Research, MSR.